Hi, folks. Welcome to a Lunch and Lead workshop. Today's topic is listening skills for leaders. My name is Tirza Watts. I'm the Director of Student Life and Campus Community, and joining me today is...
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Kristen. I'm the coordinator for student organizations.
Courtney, I'm really excited that you're here with me today. Listening skills is such an important topic for student leaders, and it's definitely one that's a lifelong learning lesson. I'm a flaming extrovert, and I constantly have to focus on being a good listener because I like to talk. And so this is a skill that I really like to present on. We do have some goals today for today's Lunch and Lead workshop. One is we want to kind of talk about what's the impact of listening skills on leaders, and how do you use your listening skills in a student organization. And then we want to actually go over, and we're going to share the active listening skills or the peer helping skills model. And this is a model and a set of steps that you can use when you're helping somebody out when they are in crisis, and it will help you help them.
Nice.
So that is our goals. So folks, as you're watching with us, you're going to need paper and pen. So if you'll pause the video and go grab some paper and a pen, there are a couple times in our workshop we're going to ask you to jot down some thoughts in response to some questions. We have a fun little quiz we'll do in a few minutes, so you'll need that to write down your answers. And if you would like attendance credit for this Lunch and Lead workshop, there'll be a quiz at the end of the presentation. The link will be loaded in the bottom of the YouTube description for the video. And so if you'll copy and paste that, it'll take you to a Google form and you can take the quiz. And then we will check on that and give you attendance credits. Okay, so let's jump into it. So Courtney, you know, I love a good meme. And so I'm curious to know, who are you as a listener?
Ooh, okay, I've got two different versions of me.
Okay.
When I'm with my friends, when I'm just comfortable in like a casual setting, or maybe even at work, talking to a student leader, because that can be comfortable for me too. I'm definitely the squirrel with the tell me all your problems. I want to help, I want to absorb it. I want to kind of brainstorm with you and be in that with you.
Right.
But if I'm doing something maybe professionally or in class or something along those lines, sometimes I'm the one right above it where it says not sure if actually listening or just waiting for his turn to talk. And that's more like when you're in your head thinking about what you're going to say next. And sometimes in those more professional settings, or when I need to kind of turn on in that moment, sometimes I can get in my head of like, okay, what am I saying next? So I've definitely seen myself as both of those.
I would agree. Those were the two that definitely drew me. Of course, I love a good grumpy cat. But yeah, it's interesting when you're sometimes in some settings and you feel the need to prove yourself or that you know something, you are sometimes not listening as well as you can because you're trying to think, how will I respond to this? And then you miss some important details sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the reasons that we do this workshop on listening skills for our student leaders on campus is because listening is an integral part for student leaders. Listening as a basic skill strengthens your relationships with the people that are around you. It builds trust. If somebody doesn't think you listen to them, they're probably not going to trust you. It improves teamwork within the group. It enhances your credibility as a leader. To be credible, you have to be authentic, and people know if you're authentically listening or not, right? It increases loyalty. I know that probably the person that I would say is my greatest mentor in my professional career was a great listener. Also was a great snarky person, and we laughed about a lot of things and talked some smack about some things. But when I truly had a problem, I really found that he deeply listened to what the problem was and then would challenge me with different things to consider as I made my own decision. And then lastly, the reason we talk about listening skills is it really shows that you care when you practice good listening skills.
Definitely.
So, Courtney, you've already alluded to this. This is the most common problem people have with listening skills. Most people don't listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. And it's just human nature, right?
Oh, yeah.
So let's take a little quiz. So folks at home, if you will grab that paper and pen, let's see what you know about listening skills. So Courtney, I'm going to give you a moment, but I want you to think about which distraction should you minimize when a team member needs to talk to you. And I've given you lots of choices, but is there one that you absolutely should minimize?
Hmm. I'm thinking cell phone.
Cell phone, the cell phone is a big, big distractor, isn't it?
It's a big distractor, and my mom always told me growing up that you got to show respect for someone else when you're talking to them, and if you have your cell phone, then it kind of looks like you're not interested, or you're not giving them the time of day. You're more paying attention to what's going on your phone.
Okay. Guess what? The answer is all of these. This was a trick question. I did start with a trick question.
That's why
Yeah, actually, all of these have the ability to be managed in a listening situation, but really, if you can remove all of these, that's important. So I know that when I was a student leader in college, and someone would come to talk to me about a problem, I would try to turn the TV off. If I was playing music, I would try to turn that off. I would say, hey, let's sit down and talk about it. If my roommate was there, I was like, hey, let's go out in the lobby. Because I lived in a residence hall. Sometimes I'd go sit in the stairwell or we go walk around campus. But truly, you want to try to minimize as many of these distractions as possible. Okay, so I'm going to go to our next question. I promise they're not all trick questions. Okay, so our second question, how much information do we retain when we hear due to busyness and lack of listening skills? So what do you think actually sinks in your brain? What's the average?
I'm going to guess 45%.
Okay. Answer is actually 25%. Isn't that kind of shocking?
That is shocking.
Yeah, so only a quarter of what we actually hear do we retain if we're not focused. I think this number can rise to that 50% range or higher if you remove those distractions.
We think we're so good at multitasking.
I know. So our third question, what percentage of U.S. workers identified communications as a general category, listening skills part of communication, as a pain point with their leader?
I'm going to guess a little higher in this one at 62%.
62%. Okay, all right. Well, our answer is actually 91%. This is I would guess it's probably in the top 2 or 3 concerns. And so for employees and students, as you think about being a student leader in your club or organization, listening skills absolutely connects with your career area. And so once you get into leadership positions at work, you really do have to think about, how do I maintain good communication, which includes those listening skills? Okay, I think I have one more question. Let's see here. Aha. What percentage of leaders identified not having enough time to meet with team members as an issue that interfered with effective leadership?
I'm going to guess 73%.
Okay. So before I show the answer, why do you think not having enough time to meet with your team members would be an issue that would impact listening skills?
Oh, it would be a problem for impacting?
Yeah, why would not having enough time to meet with their team impact listening skills?
Well, if we don't feel like we have enough time to even meet together, even get together, then how are we giving people the time of day to actually listen to what they have to say? Because a lot of times, listening, it takes time. It takes time to kind of get to the core of what people are trying to say and where they're trying to go with it. So if we don't even have enough time to get together, then how do we have enough time to really listen to each other?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. The answer is actually 52%. So half of the managers or the leaders say, I don't have enough time to actually sit down with a staff member or a member of my leadership group to actually focus and listen. And I know that's one thing that I like about our professional area of working in higher education. I've always had dedicated time once a week or every other week with my supervisor where we could literally just sit down, the two of us, doors shut, and just talk and listen to each other. And so I think that's an important thing. And so when I think about myself in a student organization, as an advisor, I always tried to meet with my president once a week. And I've actually encouraged presidents to do phone calls or Zoom meetings or in-person coffee with all their officers at least twice a month. just to make sure, like, hey, how's it going as the secretary or the treasurer or as the vice president? A lot of times vice presidents are the people that plan events for the club, you know, and so I want that president to also be practicing those listening skills by meeting one-on-one with their other officers, just to support them. Okay, so, oh, there's one more I was wrong. Oh, this is a good one. So a survey identified that doesn't listen as the number what complaint that team members have about their leaders. Is it the number 1 complaint, number 2, number 5, or number 7?
I'm gonna guess number 5.
Number 5, okay. Guess what? It's the number 2 complaint. Yeah, so again, student leaders, we want you to really think about how can I be a good listener, as well as a good communicator. We know talking and expressing and sharing information is important, but it's the number 2 complaint. So, okay, so listening skills in action. So, folks, I want you to pause the video, grab that piece of paper, and I want you to think about a time when you were listening to a friend discussing a problem. So kind of dial your brain back. So pause the video if you need to, but come up with that scenario in your mind. And then what I'd like you to do is write down 3 actions, so actual behaviors that you demonstrated or exhibited that actually showed your friend you were listening and that you were interested in what they were saying. And then I'm going to have Courtney answer this in a second, but would love for you to pause a second and think about that. Okay, so Courtney, I would love it if you would share with me, what were the 3 things that you remember doing that showed your friend or colleague, like, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm focusing?
So 2 of them were nonverbal. One being eye contact, that I am here, I am looking at you, and I am listening to you because of that. The other nonverbal piece was nodding or showing kind of like physical response when maybe things get a little more intense, or they're making a point, or just kind of nodding to show understanding. And then the other piece is summarizing. So re-summarizing what the person is saying to show them I hear them and I understand them, and even like asking for clarification, which that's another one. Oops, there's 4.
Yeah.
But that can happen after the summarizing piece, just to really be engaged in the conversation. Okay,
thank you. So folks, we're going to ask you to share with us in your quiz what were the things that you did. So make sure you take some good notes. So one of the things that I think that people absolutely can do when they're struggling as a listening leader is get some feedback. And so I think one of the things you can do is actually like take some notes for yourself and write down, like, this is what I think I do well as a leader. This is what I think I can improve on. And then check your perceptions, right? So you find a friend. Maybe it's somebody else in your student organization. Maybe it's somebody that you trust. Because I think the more you trust somebody, the more open you are to constructive feedback. And then here's some questions on our slide about what you could ask that person to give you feedback on. So, you know, how well do I listen? If you had to rate me from 1 to 10, 10 being I'm amazing, 1 I'm awful, you know, how well do I listen? When you and I are talking, do you feel listened to? Do you feel understood? You know, what are the questions I should be asking that I'm not asking you? I think that's a really great question, because sometimes you learn stuff that never crossed your mind. What messages am I missing, or have I ever misinterpreted something you've said? Could you tell me about that? And then what could I be doing differently to make you more comfortable, especially if you need to give me constructive feedback, or you need to give me a difficult message. So these are good things to ask your friend. Have you ever done anything like this, Courtney?
I don't know if I've had like that intentional amount of conversation about it. I do have like a group of friends where we give each other feedback a lot and we openly talk about that, but I don't know if we have specifically around listening. I think, do you feel heard and understood? That's actually one that has come up with my partner a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When we're having conversations, if it's more of a heavier topic or something along those lines, I think we both do a good job at checking in with each other. Like, so how do you feel after this? Do you feel like you were understood, or do we need to dive back in and keep going?
You know, that's a great example, because while we're talking about this in the realm of being a student leader in a student club, we've connected it to your career and being a leader in the workplace. Absolutely, listening skills and this topic totally connects with relationships, for sure.
Yeah.
So here's kind of my next reflection question. So students, you certainly can pause this video and take some notes and then unpause it. But Courtney, I'm going to ask for you to kind of share with us, what kind of concerns or issues do you think students have that we might learn about in our clubs?
Definitely. Like the club itself or more the individual student?
I think within the group. So imagine you've got a club that's got like 15 members. They meet once a week. They're doing things together. Are there any kind of issues or concerns that a student leader may learn about, hear about, observe that students might struggle with?
Definitely.
I'm going to give you a cue here with sometimes we learn about concerns about academic work in our image on the slide. You know, sometimes somebody's like volunteering to do all these things with your club, but they're struggling with their classwork. So that might be a concern you learn about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can learn that maybe they have some anxieties around if they have to put on an event or something along there. You might learn that there's some like self-confidence issues around certain things. So there's a piece. You might learn a lot about like that academic piece or kind of things that are going on in people's personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
Might be preventing them from being like the best that they can be and showing up to be able to contribute in their best form. So we might learn a lot about our members' personal lives. They got a new dog. They have a parent or someone that they are caregiving for.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of interpersonal things that we can learn about each other just doing our normal student organization functions.
Yeah, you know, our goal in student life and campus community is that your student clubs and organizations become a place where you find friendship, you find support, and you find community. Ultimately, we want you to feel like you belong here at the university. And so sometimes the people you become closest with, your best friends, come out of clubs or organizations. Oh, here goes the kitty cat. I wondered if he'd make an appearance in our video. So yeah, I think you named some really good things. I love that you mentioned confidence and anxiety. I think sometimes we volunteer to do things and then we realize, oh, I don't have enough time. So you become anxious, or maybe you really want to do whatever that function is for your club, and you realize, I'm not sure I really know how to do this, and you don't know how to ask for help. And again, that's why leaders can check in with their followers in the club and just be like, hey, do you have the resources you need? And really open that door for them to share and you listen about anxiety or confidence issues.
Definitely.
Okay, so here's some more questions that I think we could definitely have some conversation around. So again, students, you can pause the video and take some notes. But Courtney, let's kind of work through these. So in what ways might you use listening skills in a student organization?
I think like what we were just talking about, if you're a leader and you have some members who are going through something, or maybe you notice that they are procrastinating, and you had an assignment for them and maybe they didn't do it right on time. Typically, it's not out of laziness. There's usually something deeper going on that is kind of preventing that from happening, whether it's that self-confidence issue, whether it's just a matter of time and something's going on in their lives. But it's important to ask like open-ended questions and show genuine care to your members so that you can get the information out about maybe why are they procrastinating, so that you can also be there for them while moving the goal of the organization at the same time.
So the second question, do you think there are any kind of issues a member might talk with just the advisor about versus an officer versus maybe another member? And there may not be an answer to this, but I'm curious to know if you think there's certain things you might approach a different kind of person in your to be listened to.
Yes, my animal's also showing
Hi, Dude.
guest appearance. That is Dude in the background. When we were at the beginning with the dog or cat piece, I was like, oh, I know Tears and I are both going to have that. But yeah, I think there's also, we might go to different people for different things, like what this question is asking. Like you may talk to a member about some issues, like maybe you aren't coming to a meetings because you're just not feeling it that day. And that's a real life reality. You might be more honest about that with a member as opposed to like the officer or the advisor, when they may be really open and receptive to really hearing the honesty behind that. but you might go to an advisor for something if it's like professional related, or you're just kind of concerned about your future. You might go to an advisor for that, more advice or talking about things in that realm. And then an officer, you might go to an officer because you're having issues with a member.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes student organizations will have committees, and maybe people on your committee aren't pulling their weight. And so you might go to an officer to say, I don't know what to do. In that case, that officer will use their listening skills as a coach, so they'll listen to the problem, and then they'll provide some suggestions and ideas and ask that member to respond. And again, they're listening again with, how do these different ideas and choices, feel for you? So when you think about somebody who's been a great listener for you, what do you appreciate about those people?
I think we're all looking for connection, and people who are good listeners, like having a conversation where someone's really understanding you, that forms that connection. And that's kind of what life can be all about. So I think that just that feeling of really feeling connected with someone else can kind of lighten your day and provide happiness. So when people are good listeners, it just adds more to that beauty of life.
It does. It does. It's funny. Some of my best friends came out of clubs that I was in, and now I'm many decades later being out of college. But, some of those best friends were those listeners that we went to a club meeting, and then we walked back to our residence hall, or we went to the dining hall afterwards and just had a really great conversation. And those people that I'm still really close with now, this long later, were those good listeners. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what do people do that indicates that they're not listening to you? Are there any triggers that you've noticed or things people do and you're like, yep, you are not paying attention to me?
Oh, yeah. Well, interrupting is a big one. If they're not having eye contact, if they're distracted with their phone, definitely a lot of nonverbal communication. Again, without that eye contact, and maybe if they're like kind of fidgeting and looking around
or looking at their phone.
Yeah. Just not kind of giving you their all and their attention. That's definitely indicating they're not listening.
Okay. So have you already put your listening skills to work in an organization you've been in the past?
Yeah. So I used to be the president of my sorority when I was in college. And that was a wonderful experience because I do love listening to other people and empowering others. But I think in that instance, there's so many that are just coming to my head. I think we had an event that was going on, and we were making some changes to how things were run in our organization. Change can bring up a lot for an organization or people, but we listened to kind of multiple sides of why we should or should not make this change. The change was around something in our new member education process, and it was like a task or like a fun thing we were having people do, and certain people wanted the change for positivity, and others wanted the change because we've always done this, or did not want the change. They were resistant because we've always done this in the past, and I want them to have the same experience we did, kind of thing. So we listened to both. We wanted to make sure everyone felt heard and were part of the conversation, so that when we made that change, we were transparent and communicative throughout the process.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that sometimes I've been accused as a leader taking too long on some things because I wanted everyone to be heard. And, in a previous position, I had 26 people that worked for me. And there were 3 supervisors or leaders below me that then had groups of people. And I often would make sure that we had 2 or 3 meetings with the whole big team to talk through what are the positives of an idea, what are the negatives of an idea, what are the opportunities if we make a change. And so sometimes that could take a while to do, but I do feel very good about once we made decisions as a team, everybody felt heard, everybody felt like they had that opportunity. And so I think that's important. It's important to take the time to do that if you have the time. Now, that being said, there are times where a leader needs to make decisions and move quicker. And so that's where those one-on-ones with your team members can help you out if you've listened before about issues and concerns. Yeah. So, you know, one of the things about listening skills is you can be a great listener, but if nobody trusts you, they're not going to come and reveal what their concerns are. And so, you know, Courtney, when you think about it, and friends watching our video, if you'll pause and take some notes here, Courtney, what do you think you can do to create a trusting relationship so people will actually come to you when they're in need to talk?
Yeah. Well, I think those like the things we've talked about, like the nonverbal communication, like showing that you are active listening, that is really important. So people like trust that you actually care and are listening to them and care about their outcome. Something else that I think can be done to create trusting relationships is no matter what the problem is, you're being respectful with how you are responding to the other person. And even if you might disagree with it or want to give them some constructive criticism, as long as you're keeping it about the topic at hand and kind of like maybe the actions that were done or what could we do differently, or what was done really well, instead of making it about the person and who they are.
Yeah.
I think people would want to come back to you and keep communicating with you, because it shows that you actually care about their growth and care about what they're experiencing, instead of just one, not listening, or two, just making it personal about them. And that never really feels that good.
Yeah. Well, you actually kind of answered our second question, and I'll frame it in a phrase that maybe will stick in your head. So good job. One of the things that you can do to get members to talk to you is on a regular basis, ask for feedback. And that feedback can be about what's going on in your student organization. So something I've always done is plus minus delta. I have the group at the end of any experience. It could be a meeting, could be we just did this event, but what went well? That's the plus. What didn't go well? That's the minus. And then delta is what will we change the next time we either have this interaction, we have this meeting, or we do this event. And if you make feedback and listening and being able to share what you feel a regular part of your meetings, people are more likely to come to you then, even when it's a big group issue and they want to talk to the whole team, versus they want to come to you as a leader and just need to be listened to.
I love that. In our sorority chapter meetings, we would have roses and thorns, and we had like two buckets for that, and they would go around the entire room. And everyone had an opportunity to put feedback in either the roses or the thorns, and then we'd read that aloud at the end. So that's definitely an opportunity for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was a good one. Okay, so what do you need to do as a student leader when it comes to listening? You just need to be the best listener that you can be, and just try. I think that authenticity piece that I mentioned earlier is really important. Just try your best. So I want to talk to you a little bit about where we're going to go for the second half of our workshop, and it's really about learning about having active listening skills. The Center for Creative Leadership is a great international leadership training company. And so this is one of their great graphics that I really love. And it says that active listening has 6 steps. So paying attention, don't, judge people while they're talking, just withhold that. Think about and reflect on what you heard. Ask clarifying questions, kind of summarize what you heard, and then maybe share thoughts and opinions. And I want to show a quick little video. So we'll see if we can get this to work here.
Something's happening.
The enemy of writing isn't
We got to skip through our little ad
being
here.
interrupted.
Okay.
Think about how much information you get every day from listening. Your boss, your colleagues, your clients, and your suppliers may communicate with you often. So will your family and friends. How much of what all these people say do you pay attention to? How much are you actually remembering from these conversations? Chances are it's a lot less than you think. A lot of times we act as if we're listening to the other person, but the reality is that our minds are racing to other topics or already planning what we're going to say in return. This means that we can miss important things that the other person is saying. Active listening is when you make a conscious effort to hear and understand people so that you get the complete message. There are several things you can do to become an active listener. First, You need to pay attention. We know this is a bit obvious, but it's the most important part of active listening. For instance, make eye contact with the person talking to you. Ignore outside factors like other conversations so that you can focus solely on what the person is saying. Most importantly, put your own thoughts on hold. Resist the urge to start planning out what you're going to say in return. You also need to show the other person that you're listening to them. You can nod your head, smile, and say yes occasionally. All of these signals let the other person know you're still with them. Providing feedback on what the other person has just said is another important part of active listening. For instance, all of us hear information through our own personal filters and judgments. This can affect our understanding. To make sure you heard and understood the message correctly, paraphrase it or repeat it back to the person. You can also ask questions to get more information, but make sure that you listen to what they're saying before you plan your response. You also need to avoid interrupting when they are speaking. Once they're finished, you can respond appropriately and with an honest answer or opinion. Active listening is a skill that all of us should use more often. The better you are at listening, the more information you'll receive. This can pay off with big rewards in your career and strengthen your bonds with family and friends. You can find out more about active listening in the article that accompanies this video.
So Courtney, that quick little video is from a company called Mind Tools. And for our audience, I'd highly encourage you to Google Mind Tools. They have amazing videos, articles, quizzes that you can take about all kinds of leadership skills.
Awesome.
Okay, so that gave us a good overview, and I love that earlier in our recording here, you actually mentioned many of these steps.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, we're going to transition to the second part of our workshop, and we're going to talk briefly about the peer helping skills model. So the model has 8 steps, and we're just going to quickly review what each of these steps are. So one is to practice solar. We'll cover what that is in a minute. To listen, to identify feelings, to figure out what are the feelings under the surface, use a variety of listening techniques, have a problem statement, brainstorm some solutions, and then make a plan. And if the student that you're working with or your friend that you're working with can't really make a plan at this point in time, figure out if there's someone you should refer them to. So let's quickly walk through these steps. So a basic attending skills is what you've been referring to when you said about saying yes or nodding your head or saying aha. And so those are called verbal and nonverbal minimal encouragers. It's something small, so it's minimal, but it tells the person you're paying attention and to keep going. The other thing you can do is a technique called solar. And I really love this technique. It's about eye contact and body language. So let's flip the slide here and learn a little bit more about solar. So solar is sit, open posture, lean in, eye contact if it's appropriate, and relax. And so if you can remember this acronym, when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I really need to talk, first thing I want to do is I want to get on the same level with that person. I wouldn't want to stand if they were sitting or sit if they were standing because there's a power dynamic there. I want to get on the same eye level. So I might say, hey, let's go into the lobby and sit on the couch, or, you know, let's sit down in my office. So sitting makes people a little bit more comfortable. Open posture is, I'm not going to sit there and listen to you and, you know, have my arms crossed like this. That says I'm closed off, and it's a subconscious message. So I'm going to sit and relax my body and have open posture. Maybe put my hands on my thighs, put my shoulders back, and just look at the person. At times, it's very appropriate to kind of lean in. That, again, is that nonverbal subtle message. I'm focused on you if I lean towards you. If appropriate, make eye contact. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes for cultural reasons. Other times, maybe the person is really emotional and it's uncomfortable to make eye contact for them or for you. You don't have to look them in the eyes the entire time. But if you can make eye contact and it's comfortable, do that. And then relax. And the reason relax is part of the solar technique is that even if they're sharing something really awful with you, there's somebody else out there that can help them if you don't feel like you can. So it's not going to be the end of the world if you can't fix their problem. And really, that's not your role as a listener. But just relax. Listen to them, hear what's there. In worst case scenario, you can refer them to somebody else who can help them. So that's the solar technique. The next piece of this model is recognizing and actually responding to feelings. So feelings are emotional components that underlie our statements or behaviors. The basic helping response contains both the underlying feelings and the reason for the feeling. And the reason we need to address emotions first is if we can't get past that barrier, we're not going to get to like the thinking part of the problem, because emotions are right there out front. And sometimes we don't even realize we're expressing them non-verbally, but the listener knows because they can see it on your face or read it in your body language. So Courtney, there's actually 4 types of feelings. That's it, only 4. Any word you can come up with that's an emotion falls in one of these 4 categories. So mad, sad, glad, or scared.
I can see that.
Yeah, so sometimes it's helpful to just think, oh, they said they're frustrated. Frustrated could be part of mad, or it could be part of scared, right? So we know that we have those 4 categories. So we're going to do a little demonstration here. I'm going to put on my inner drama queen. I'm going to read a statement to you, and then I want you to guess what my emotion is. And you don't have to say mad, sad, glad, or scared. You can say any emotion that comes to mind.
Okay.
But let's see if you're accurate at picking up what I'm trying to express. The doctor says he's going to be all right.
I'm feeling some excitement.
Yes. I am tired of her giving me orders.
Ooh, I'm feeling annoyed.
There you go. I've had it up to here with him. I just hope he never comes back.
Fed up.
Yeah. All right, do it your way. Do anything you want.
First thing that came to my head was kind of giving up.
Mm-hmm.
And then something else came up with the do anything you want. Kind of giving up and just like putting it all on the other person.
Yeah, I feel like I was also feeling a little snarky, like, fine, just do whatever you want.
Snarky, that's good.
I never thought I could be so calm when things went wrong, but I was.
Surprised, like in a good way about yourself.
Absolutely. No one here but me and my fish. No one calls and no one comes by.
We're lonely.
That's right, a little lonely and sad. So part of being able to suss out what that emotion is when the person, because people don't come to us and talk calm all the time when we're listening to them. We want to identify what that feeling is. And then there's a way that you can actually respond to them. And so you do that in the conversation. And there's a cute little formula. It's simple. Sounds like you feel blank because of this. So an example might be, so you're feeling angry because you think the test was unfair.
Yeah.
The person is then, the person who was speaking, who you were listening to, is either going to go, yep, or they're going to go, no, that's not what I meant. And then they'll share some more. So it's a way to kind of check in. So I'm going to read this statement and then you try to rephrase it, okay?
Okay.
Acted like I was important. He even remembered my name.
Okay. So you feel seen.
Yeah.
Because he took the time to remember your name.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time I think of that place, I get a knot in my throat and I get tearful.
Ooh. Okay, so you're feeling a little sad because that place brings up maybe some past memories or something's going on with that place.
Absolutely. Good job. Yep. And so the more you do this, the more it comes easier to you. But you're right. Like you identify 2 very distinct emotions and can connect it with the rest of the information.
And it's that summarizing piece and like clarifying. So that gives them an opportunity to say, well, I don't know if I felt sad. I may have felt this.
Right.
It kind of opens up some dialogue there.
Absolutely. So another version of doing this is really looking at what are the underlying feelings. So in this statement, it just doesn't make any sense. I've always done well in school, even when I didn't even really try. Now I'm here in my first semester of college, really trying, and my grades are rotten. What am I going to tell my parents? So in this case, there's stated feelings, and then there's the underlying feelings. So the stated ones were they're confused because guess what? School came easy before. Now it's not. They're discouraged about their grades. They're anxious about what to tell their parents. There's some underlying emotion in there as well. And so sometimes as a listener, it helps to know that. And it could be that they're embarrassed about doing well because they've always been successful. And they may have actually feel like they failed their parents. So we're not going to do this one, but for those of you that are watching this, I want you to absolutely pause, take some notes on this. And so here's an example that might happen in your student organization, and I'd love for you to come up with what are the stated feelings versus the underlying feelings. So our situation is, I'm feeling really uptight. I've been planning our campus fundraiser for the last 3 months, and my committee's making me crazy. No one meets deadlines, and I really don't know what to do. Should I just get mad at them? Should I just do everything myself? Which, by the way, I've been doing now, and I'm exhausted. I've tried to talk to the club president, and he didn't really seem interested in helping me out. I don't know what to do. So at this point in time, it'd be great if you pause the video and take some notes, like what are the stated feelings, and then what might be some underlying feelings. Okay, so where do you go from here? You've listened, you've used good body language, so minimal, nonverbal and verbal encouragers. You probably practiced the solar method to get on the same level and to lean in. You have used some thought process about what's the emotions. So as we transition, now we have a bunch of techniques. I'm going to review really quickly. I think it's 6 or 8 techniques. Just give you a quick little example of these. And so you can use these as you're continuing the conversation. So one is to reflect feelings. You know, this project's really hard. I'm struggling to find information, and my classmates are either late to our project meetings or skipping them. I don't know what to do. The project's due next Wednesday. Courtney might say back to me, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed. Another thing you can do is use open-ended questions. And so the quickest way to understand open-ended questions is they're a question that you can't say yes or no to. So if I say, do you like cereal for breakfast, Courtney?
Yes.
Right. So I can't go anywhere else with that. But if I instead phrase that as an open-ended question, I say, hey, Courtney, what do you like to eat for breakfast? Tell me about what you like to eat.
Well, I like to eat a variety of things, like yogurt one day or avocado toast another day, or cereal is actually much more of a dessert for me.
Is it?
I could go on forever about this.
But you see how I got like a paragraph versus just a yes or a no. So you want to think about questions that start with the words what, how, when, who, where, why. Those leading words makes the person respond with a sentence or a paragraph versus a yes or no, and then conversation is cut off. Next thing you do can use as a technique for conversation is a continuing statement. So you're sitting there talking, they've shared a piece, and you're like, hey, tell me more about this piece that you just shared. It gets them to expand on what they were talking about, so you learn a little more information. The next technique that you can use in conversation is self-disclosure. And so sometimes we've had a similar experience and we might want to share that, right? The question is sharing your experience helpful to that person, and does it help further the conversation as you're trying to be a good listener? And if it does, share your experience. What I tell people though is to practice the 80-20 rule. You should be listening 80% of the time, talking 20% of the time. So if I do think that it is appropriate for me to share, oh, I've been in a car wreck as well, I probably don't need to tell the 10-minute version of all the dirty details of my car wreck, right? But I might say, wow, I understand that you're in pain and that you're scared about how you're going to pay to, you know, fix your car. I've gone through that too. I had a car wreck a couple years ago. I totally understand that. I was nervous as well. Stop, right? But don't need to tell all the details. So practice the 80-20 rule. The next technique for conversation you can use is confrontation. And that might seem kind of strange to talk about confronting people when you're listening and trying to be a peer helper. What it means in this context is, let's say that you say to me, hey, Tirza, how you doing? And I go, I'm doing great, right? My nonverbals are saying, I'm not. I'm shaking my head no. And sometimes people in crisis or when they're upset, they non-verbally leak out true things that don't match what they're verbally saying. So like I've had, you know, someone come talk to me before and I'm like, are you okay? You seem upset. And they're like, I'm fine. But like, you know, they're doing weird things with their hands, or their body language seems really tense. And so
or their eyes go wide. I'm fine.
Yeah, so when I confront them, I might go, well, you know, your body seems really tense, or like you're clicking that pen. Do you realize that? Like, I kind of confront that I see a mismatch is what I'm saying in confrontation.
Yeah.
This is what Courtney's talked about earlier, is perception checking. So this is a great technique for conversation. So here's our example. Most of the time we just end up wasting time in meetings. They never start on time. They always run long. One or two people tend to do all the talking. When we finally get to business, no one wants to speak up because they're either lost or want to avoid conflict. And so the peer helper might say, Courtney, why don't you read this one for us?
Yeah. So I get the sense that you're pretty frustrated about some of the team's communication patterns. Am I right?
Yep. So that way she's identified an emotion, the content that she picked up from the longer statement in a succinct statement, and she's checking, like, is this right? And so that's an important technique too. Another technique is just paraphrasing. So the person may speak in a whole long paragraph, and when you paraphrase, you're boiling down that whole story that they shared with you to one sentence or maybe two. So I like the challenge of my committee. I get to lead new member recruitment for my club, and my team really knows what they're doing. We're working on tight deadlines, but we're very focused. Courtney might say,
it sounds like you're enjoying this role in the challenges of leading a team that performs well under pressure.
I am. I am so excited. We're going to do a great project this year. So again, that paraphrasing is a way to check in. Another tip for conversation, or technique for conversation, is really listening for a hidden agenda. And so that's when there's an underlying problem that the helpee really wants your assistance with, but they're not initially comfortable with bringing it up. So sometimes it comes out once they realize, okay, the timing's right, it's quiet, we're sitting down, okay, I feel like I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to share with you. So an example might be somebody comes to talk to you about running for an officer position in your student organization next year, and you can tell something's quite not right, and it turns out that when they finally open up to you, that the hidden agenda, the real issue is that their parents lost their job, so they're worried about paying for school. So if I can't pay for school, can I come back and actually run to be this officer? Sometimes you have to listen for cues for a hidden agenda, and other times you just have to ask, is there anything else going on? And then just being silent. Because silence is also a helping skill technique. And just let that kind of silence sit there and see if they'll take the risk to share something else with you. Because in this case, if they said, you know, they were worried about coming back to school, you could encourage them to run for that officer's position, and potentially try to connect them with the financial aid office, with the care team, someone in the dean of students office. There are places where they can get assistance potentially for the cost of school. Okay. So next one is problem statement. And you've mentioned this one, Courtney, so I was glad you already knew about this one. It's when, like, you've listened to this whole long experience and you really want to say, so it sounds like, based on everything you've shared with me, this is what's going on. And so then the helpee can say yes, no, or add or correct. And so in an example, we might say, so what you're really struggling with, this was an earlier example, is telling your parents you failed 3 classes. And they're going to go, yes, what do I do? So we now know the problem. So that moves us to the next section of the helping skills model, which is brainstorming. I literally have sat down with people before. We got the paper and pen and we did a pro-con list. If you did this to address your problem, what would go well? What could really go bad? You know, other times we've just brainstormed what are all our options. And so then we would talk through the pros and cons of each one of those options. Ultimately, the person you're listening to and that you're trying to help, they have to make the decision. You can't make it for them because it's their problem. Your life skills are complete, or your life experiences are very different, and your solution might not work for them. Okay, so Courtney, we just went through like 8 or 9, or I think I started with, I said 6 to 8. I think it's more like 8 to 10. There's lots of techniques you can use. Do you think you use every single one of these each time you're a peer helper?
I think not. I think it's definitely situational because it can probably be very overwhelming to try and use all of them.
You got it.
Kind of combating each other too.
Yeah, sometimes people are really upfront with what their problem is and what they want you to listen about. And you only need to use 2 of those techniques. Sometimes you got to really peel back the layers as you're listening. And so you got to use more techniques. So no, you don't have to use all those techniques, but they're there as skills in your little listening toolkit.
I love this little meme.
I know, isn't he fun?
Yes. No.
Okay, so you've been listening to a friend. We're at the end of the peer helping model. There's two choices to wrap up the conversation. One is that the person, you've talked about options, now that they've identified their problem, the pros and cons of those, they choose what they're going to do. And so often, you know, as I'm listening to somebody, they say, okay, I'm going to talk to my parents tomorrow night when we go out to dinner. And I'm going to tell them that I've had a really bad semester. I've failed 3 classes. But I'm also going to tell them that I've signed up for tutoring, whatever. Let's say that they've come up with what their response will be. I'm there to help them come up with, well, how do you want to start the conversation? You know, if the conversation goes badly, you know, would you like to meet with me afterwards to talk about it or call me? But they have to pick what their resolution is, and I'm just there to support it. So they make a plan.
That's pretty helpful, because sometimes we think we need to give people advice. But if we remember, it's not our job to come up with a solution for them. It's just our job to kind of help them come up with solutions. That's certainly more helpful for the person helping.
Yeah, let's say they come up with 3 possible solutions to their problem. My question as a listener and a helper might be, well, which one do you think will probably go the best? So they pick it, and then I go, okay, so how could you implement that? What do you think you need to do first or say first? If this happens, what do you think your response should be? And my job is just to help them figure out how it could go and make a plan. So moving on to the second one, let's say that like you guys haven't come up with a solution. Maybe the emotions are really, really overwhelming to the point where we have to back up and still deal with the emotions. We couldn't get to the problem statement or the brainstorming. It's to make a referral. There are tons of people on campus that are available to help students deal with any kind of issue or problem. And so I think it's important to think, like, could an academic advisor help them? Could somebody in the registrar's office? Could the advisor for your student club? Could somebody in student life? And if you look at this graphic, that pink person in the middle, that's the student leader. You actually have a pretty broad network, whether you realize it or not, as a listener and a peer helper. You've met people in our office. Maybe you've met people in your academic department. You remember talking to somebody at a program that, you know, has this connection. And so you want to refer them to somebody else that can help them. And worst case scenario, if you get stuck, you call our office and you ask to speak to Courtney, you ask to speak to me, ask to speak to Jamie, our assistant director. One of the 3 of us, we're going to help you find the right person to refer them to. And if it's anything you're ever worried about somebody's safety, you absolutely want to either call the counseling center or the university police. But let's say that you have a good referral. Let's say it's an academics issue, and so you refer them, let's say, to Q&A, the Center for Undergraduate Education and Advising. That's our advising office. I typically say, well, when do you think you'll go to Q&A to talk to the advisor? And I want to have that person commit. I'm going to do it Tuesday after my 2 o'clock class, because they're more likely to do it. And I'm great. Why don't you text me after you drop by there? And if I don't hear from them, then I'm going to probably text them and go, hey, how did it go when you dropped in the Q&A office? Did you get to talk to an academic advisor? And if they say yes, awesome, check in on them as a listener and a helper. And if they didn't go, well, is there, you know, do you want to make another plan? Now, here's the biggest thing about the wrap it up thing. You're a peer helper, you're not a counselor. And so sometimes people are going to share really heavy stuff if you're a good listener. So remember that we have a counseling center on campus. The Dean of Students office, which is on the 3rd floor of the Tivoli Student Union, that office actually has an entire team of people called the care team. Their entire jobs are to make sure that they connect you with the right resources, and they're there as helpers. And so just remember, you're a peer helper, but not a counselor. And if something's really heavy, get in touch with us or get in touch with the counseling center or the care team. Okay, so there's kind of one final piece to this whole thing. You know, sometimes we listen to folks and we know this is a pretty heavy situation. I might need to tell somebody else about this. I might need to make an informational report. And so you have to balance confidentiality with, is this person in danger or could really get hurt, or is somebody harming them? So if that's the kind of situation you heard of, I want you to think about all the people that you could potentially say, hey, you know, I was talking to so-and-so after our meeting and they're struggling with this. Maybe you don't need to tell all the details, but you say, I'm concerned, I don't know what to do next. So you could tell your advisor, you could tell a faculty or staff member, care team we've already mentioned, you could tell one of us in our office, the student life. If it's an academic, issue, maybe you talk with a department head. Let's say you're in the math club and something's going on. Maybe you talk to the head of the math department. Could be university police, the counseling office, or student conduct, or the equity office. So again, just know sometimes you might hear something that goes beyond just a personal problem, and you need extra help. And as a student, we want you to clearly know that help does exist. Okay, so I won't repeat this, but we've put another version of the model so you kind of see what the model looks like, and we want to encourage you to actually test it out. So in our face-to-face workshop, normally this would be the point in the workshop where we would put you in groups of 3, and we would actually have you practice. We would give you little scenarios, and one person be the helper, one person be the helpee, and the third person is the observer to give feedback to the helper to say, oh, you did good. You might want to do this better next time or expand this. Being a great helper and a great listener takes practice. And so that's something that unfortunately in a virtual workshop, we can't really do for you. But we do want you to practice it. So here are some closing tips. When you're being a good listener, understand what's at stake for you. Your truth and the other person's truth might not match up. Everybody's voice needs to be heard, especially if you're listening for maybe a group of people talking. And most of all, you want to be present as a human, like be there. And so some final reminders, and I'll let Courtney go over these.
Yeah, so limit distractions. That's probably so easy for us in these quarantines, right? Just kidding. Limit distractions.
Barking dogs and cats walking in front of us.
Yes, exactly. But limiting those distractions, putting your cell phone away, putting those things away so that you can be the best self that you can be in that. Paying attention to what is being said, not what you want to say. Very hard, and it's an ongoing skill to learn. Being okay with silence. I think that's so important with that time in between when you are trying to think of what you want to say. If you're okay with silence, that's the time that you can think about what you're going to say next after you, reflect on everyone.
Dude does not know how to practice silence. Thank you, audience, for hanging out with us here while we take care of puppy dog.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so being okay with silence, and then encouraging the other person to offer ideas and solutions before you give yours. Restate the key points you heard and ask whether they are accurate. I think that one's always so important so that you can leave feeling that you have understood the person fully and they can leave feeling understood, which is such a wonderful feeling.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I want to share with you that we did use a lot of resources with this presentation. Again, I want to reiterate that I think Mind Tools is a great website. Check it out. Some of our quiz questions came from articles that I read online. And so there are some references there. But again, check out Mind Tools. And lastly, we want you to practice this. So part of getting credit for this workshop will be taking a quiz that we'll have online, as I mentioned earlier. It'll be a link to a Google form. It'll be listed below the video description on YouTube. But we also want you to practice this, and we're going to ask you a question in that kind of quiz attendance sheet to tell us how it went, what you think you did well, what you think you need to improve on, and then what you think you'll do different next time you're really in a situation where you're listening to somebody. So practice this model, give it a try. So any last thoughts from you, Courtney?
I just think this is an important lesson that no matter what, it's a lifelong process that we'll always have to go back and learn this. But the more you practice it, the more you'll have that in your toolkit. But know that it is a lifelong process, and that can either be overwhelming or pretty relieving that we don't have to have the answer right away. But again, that practice will always help.
Thank you. So again, we hope that this workshop is giving you a little more information to put listening skills in your toolkit as a student leader. Again, Courtney and I both think they're really important skills to have when you think about yourself involved on campus. So thank you for joining us today, and we're going to sign off. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.